Welcome to this edition of our Get Untethered Hangout. Thank you for joining us. Hello from Houston today. Kristi, as you can see, is still in Austin. You're probably familiar with that background, which we'll talk about more in a minute. But just a couple of things. We're glad to have you here. We're going to be talking about expense and receipt management in Evernote, and this is a great topic that's proved to be a huge time and effort savings, great efficiencies gained by moving this process into Evernote. And Kristi and I differ in how we do this, and we're going to demo and actually show you our system in great detail as we go through here. But let me just do a little housekeeping as we kind of get started. First of all, I know my picture might be a little bit grainy. I'm on a friend's network in a darker room with a thunder and lightning storm going on outside. So we're keeping our fingers crossed that this is all going to work out really easily and well. And if you're having any problem seeing us or hearing us during this, if you could just please let us know in Q&A pod so that we can see if it's a pattern or just an isolated thing. We'll try to troubleshoot it on the fly. But what you're watching, let me introduce myself. I'm Stacey Harmon, which you can probably see from the from the lower third there, and my co-author Kristi Willis is also involved here. Hello, Kristi.
Hello.
And we are the authors of Untethered with Evernote, and we're also Evernote ambassadors as well as Evernote Business Certified Consultants. So we love Evernote, and it's central to what we do both professionally and personally and how we manage our lives. So this is a monthly hangout where we're expanding some of the concepts that we talk about in our book. We published a book, Untethered with Evernote Tips and Workflows for Independent Entrepreneurs. It's an ebook currently, but this is the sample of the print version, so you can see that we've got some print versions coming. They've been ordered, and you'll be able to buy one on demand and have it shipped to you. We'll launch that process sometime in the next week. So a couple of options for you, but getuntethered.com is where you can get further details about that. And we have, clearly we cover expense and receipt management in the book. This hangout's designed to go into more detail about that. And just to recap, this is, I think, our fourth hangout that we've been doing. We do them on a monthly basis, covering a different topic each time, and they're all recorded, so you can watch them on demand and review the parts and pieces in a little more detail at your own pace when it's over. Our first one, just a quick recap of the topics if you want to watch any of the prior ones. Our first one was strategies and tips for organizing your notes in Evernote. Then we followed that up with strategies for managing business cards and leads with Evernote. That was a really great one where we actually demo the iOS business card feature. Kristi did a great job of showing that, and that really can transform your Evernote usage. Third, to do or not to do Evernote and task management. Is Evernote the right task manager for you? If you watch that hangout, you'll get some ideas about yes or no. Certainly it can go either way. And then today, obviously, we're talking about managing receipts and expenses, which is covered in Chapter 4, Smooth Operations of our book. And then we'll be talking next month during our October scheduled hangout on search. So we're going to talk about how you find the things that you need to find. Key to putting everything in Evernote is actually being able to retrieve it, and Evernote has some of the smartest search on the planet, and we're going to show you those power skills that you need in order to be able to retrieve notes amongst something. If you have 11,000 notes in your account, how can we find what we're looking for quickly? So we'll be covering that. And as a little a surprise, we're going to be doing a update from the upcoming Evernote conference. Kristi and I are both really honored to have been selected to be speaking at Evernote's conference that's coming up October 2nd and 3rd in San Francisco. We'll be presenting there, and obviously there'll be a lot of product announcements and new opportunities and contacts that we make, and we're going to do a hangout live from the Evernote Business Conference. We will publicize that at the Google page, so you can kind of keep in touch there, and a great way to really keep up with that is to follow the hashtag on Twitter, which I think is going to be EC for Evernote Conference 2014. So we're still confirming that, but we will certainly put the Hangout link into the Twitter stream so you can join us and get kind of a live update with what's going on at the Evernote Conference. Probably Friday morning. We're going to see how our schedule kind of works out, but we will definitely be doing that. So that was a lot of intro, but wanted to make sure that you guys knew kind of what the resource here is. And then let me pass it over to Kristi so she can introduce herself and what you got going on in the background there, Kristi.
Hi, Stacey, and hello, Andrew. Thanks for checking in with us on the Q&A window. Well, I have a little bit of a mess behind me, but it's becoming organized. I've taken it upon myself to organize all our family photos and documents, so we're in the mid-sorting process behind me. So apologize for the mess, but some of it's going into Evernote, as you can imagine. So it'll be good when it's all done, but in the middle of sorting. Welcome, everybody. If you haven't been to one of the Hangouts before, we would love for you to participate by adding questions to the Q&A window. As Stacey mentioned, you can also follow along with our hashtag #GetUntethered on Twitter or ask questions that way. We'll be happy to answer them however we can. As we're going through today, I am going to be Vanna White, and since Stacey's internet connection isn't as strong as the one she normally uses, so I'm going to be showing the Hangout slides for both of us, and so I'll just be kind of Vanna White on that, so just kind of follow along as we're going. Anything else that we need to kick off with, Stacey?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to get going and roll right into how can we manage our receipts and why is this a good process for us?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, I really have, this is the process that changed my world. So I've been using Evernote for years before this really became a big thing for me. But when I went out on my own 5 years ago and started my own business, I had no idea what a big deal receipts were going to become in my world. And so this is the process that was really kind of life-changing for me because I cannot stand little pieces of paper and I tend to lose them. So Evernote has really transformed this for me. So just a couple of introductory slides here in case you missed us. That's Stacey and that's me and how you can find us on Twitter. And just a couple of ways that you can follow along with the book. So there is just a small smattering of the receipts that I get, and particularly as somebody who works with food, I have all kinds of grocery receipts, as you can see on the top. We're working on a cookbook right now, and so lots of recipe testing going on. It is really easy for this to get out of control for me. So I have a weekly process where I get the receipts into Evernote, and I think that's the single most important thing that I've just get the receipts into Evernote, and then having a process from there really helps. There are a lot of different ways that you can get the receipts into Evernote, and so I'm going to cover just a couple of those. If you're newer to Evernote, some of this might be new info for you. If you're an experienced Evernote user, bear with me as I go through a little bit of review. So one of my favorite ways to get receipts into Evernote, particularly when I'm traveling, so I don't have to carry the receipts around, is to photograph them. I use the document camera on Evernote. If you want more advanced photographing, there are different scanning apps for both Android and iPhone that you can use as well. But for my purposes, the Evernote camera, document camera, has always worked great. It puts this in as scannable text, so and searchable text, and so I'm going to be able to find the item whether I search for Office Depot or whether I search for the date. I'll be able to find it that way. So this has been a really great way. Just get it in there, taking a picture on the fly wherever I am. So Stacey's taught me to take the photos when I'm in the hotel room, and so that's become part of my morning process. It's a great best practice. I don't have to bring the receipts home with me, so I love that. The other way that I get receipts in is I will also scan them. I have been known to have little scanning parties on Friday night with a takeout pizza and maybe some wine. And I cannot recommend enough having a great scanner. I currently am using a Fujitsu ScanSnap that Fujitsu was kind enough to give me to test out as an ambassador. I love it. It's the one on the right. I can, if I'm going to be gone for a long period of time, I can take it with me because it's so small. And what I covet is the big Evernote ScanSnap, specifically designed for Evernote. If you haven't seen the video of this, go on the Evernote site and watch it. This is coming to KW Solutions Group this year. That's like, this is my one big I have to purchase for the year, because you can just throw receipts in it, hit scan, it scans them all, it learns where you store your receipts. It's beautiful. It makes me cry a little bit. But there are other scanners too. If you're not interested in a ScanSnap, I know that Stacey has a Canon that she really likes. But look for a scanner that's specifically designed to get things into Evernote, because I think you'll find that that cuts a step out of the process and makes life much easier. So love being able to scan receipts directly into Evernote. And I can't wait. Going to get that big scanner. Isn't it beautiful? I love that scanner. And then another way that I get the receipts into Evernote is I email them. And so with your Evernote account, each Evernote account has a unique email address. I have saved that to my contacts, brilliantly calling it Evernote. And when I get a receipt in my email, I can just forward it to Evernote. By default, any email that you forward to Evernote goes to your default notebook, but you can specify a notebook if you want, symbol at the end of the subject, and then typing the notebook name in. So, for example, I put all receipts that need to be reconciled with our accounting system in a .receipts to reconcile notebook. You can also add a tag if you know it. So, for example, I added in the expense utilities tag because this is Wi-Fi on a trip. And so it would go into the Wi-Fi bucket for us. And so I can add that tag. I could even add a reminder if I like, using the exclamation symbol. So this is one great way that you can add things. I will admit that when I'm being lazy or I don't know the name of the notebook, I will just forward it to Evernote and let it go in my inbox, and then I process my inbox regularly. You also can set up something called auto-filing in your Evernote preferences. And when you do that, when you turn on the auto-filing, when you email receipts to Evernote, Evernote will find similar types of documents and put them in the notebook for you. I don't use this because which I'll show you in a second, I collect all my receipts in one place and then we process them to the proper notebook. I would be afraid that if I turned on auto-filing, they would go to the end notebook, the reference notebook, not the inbox that we've created for receipts. So, but for others, depending on your process, that auto-filing might be helpful and an easy way to get the emails into your receipt notebook.
Kristi, before you move on, could I just answer a common question that I get when I talk about this auto-filing with the subject line, the notebook and tag. So one of the things to keep in mind is you have to be very specific and know the exact name of the notebook or the tag that you want to auto-file or added to your note. And one of the questions is, if I spell that wrong or I don't have it, what happens? And just to know that it will default to your default inbox. So the note still gets created, it just doesn't go anywhere except to your default Evernote inbox.
That's a great point, Stacey. And one of the reasons that if I don't know for the notebook name is or the tag name is, I absolutely just send it to that default notebook so that I can process it when I'm emptying my notebook, my inbox notebook regularly. Thank you. That's a great point. So because the syntax can be a little challenging to remember, another great way to get email receipts into Evernote is if, depending on the email tool you're using, you can clip them into Evernote. So I use Google Chrome and Gmail, and I've got that Evernote web clipper up there, and while I'm in my email, I can just click the web clipper, recognizes it's an email, and it clips it appropriately. So what I love about the clipper is it makes it easy for me to pick the right notebook and the tag because it helps me fill that in. So I don't have to remember the syntax exactly. So really enjoy using the clipper as well. I have also, and I didn't put it in here, but I've also started using Boxer, which on my iPhone, which is an email an email app that will let you send things directly to Evernote, and that has been really great because again, I can add it to that receipts to reconcile notebook. You know, John, it is difficult to remember the syntax for the subject line. I do pretty well to remember that it's at notebook. So for me to remember the at symbol is I want it to go to I want it to go to this place, and so the @ symbol is the location for me. So that's helpful. The # for the tag is a little bit harder for me to remember, but the way I think about it is I'm putting a hashtag, which is like a keyword, which is a tag. So if you remember, @ symbol is the place, and the # is the hashtag or the tag. And so that has helped me a little bit with that. But I will admit that it is, as I have started using Evernote more and more, and I have more notebooks and more tags, it is harder for me to remember those. So using the clipper or putting it in my inbox so I can process it later has been a little bit easier than remembering the syntax.
And it also goes back to, obviously you have to remember the # and the @ symbol, and for me, just like Kristi, I remember that a hashtag, which is a # symbol, so that's a tag, and that by default means that the @ symbol for me is a notebook. But about your notebook naming conventions too, so keep your notebook name simple if you're going to be forwarding into that on a frequent basis. So simply, in this case, might call it receipts or incoming receipts, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's a great point, Stacey. The other way to get receipts into Evernote is through digital retrievers, and Stacey's going to talk more about how she uses File This, but File This will allow you to connect credit card, utility, all different kinds of statements to Evernote, and it will collect them for you and put them in your Evernote system. If this, then that, or IFTT, and Zapier, I don't know how you pronounce it. I would say Zapier, but that's because it looks French to me. But Zapier will allow you to collect receipts as well, depending on your system. So, for example, I have added a screenshot that will allow you to create a recipe to upload receipts that match a certain criteria to Evernote, which is great. And Randy brought up a great point. I have just loaded iOS 8, but for all of you iPhone users, when you upgrade, you can now clip directly into Evernote, which is wonderful. Thank goodness they've added that. That's been such a missing piece for so many of us. But lots of different ways to do that. The digital retrievers are great. For those things that don't have another connection to Evernote. I want to make sure they get in there regularly. I want to make sure my cable bill's in there and have that backup. So this is the fourth way that I get things into Evernote. So those are some of the skills. Again, the key is just get the receipt into Evernote. That's the first step. And I'll do a little bit through our process. I don't work with a CPA like Stacey does, and so I have a little bit simpler process than she does. But I will just kind of walk you through what we do. And by the way, huge thanks to Lillian, who is on the call today. She's my production assistant and helps make so many things happen in our company. But one of those is making sure the receipts get reconciled. Thank goodness, because I'm terrible about this. So my job is to get the receipts into Evernote, and then once that happens, I make sure that all those receipts are in a Receipts to Reconcile notebook.
And actually, Kristi, do you see the question there about why you put a dot or your Receipts to Reconcile notebook? Could you address that?
That's a great question, Catherine. And the reason I did that is that your notebook naming is going to appear in alphabetical order. And because I want the receipts to appear at the top of my financial notebook, which you'll see an example of that stack at the beginning, I just added a dot so I could still call it receipts and use an R word, but have it appear at the top of my list. And so again, you'll see an example of that. Adding a symbol like a dot at the beginning just does a forced sort order. So I've also done the same thing with my inbox, you can see there. So for me, the key is get those receipts into Evernote, and so my job is to get them into that notebook. And then as part of Lillian's regular processes, she goes in, finds the receipts that are in the notebook, and goes through a reconciling process with our accounting software, which we use FreshBooks. You could use anything, but we use FreshBooks. And so Lillian goes in and cross-references the expenses with FreshBooks. Things from the business checking account are auto-loaded into FreshBooks. If I've paid cash for something or maybe used a personal credit card because that's what I had with me, Lillian would add that into FreshBooks. She then categorizes it in FreshBooks with the categories that we have agreed upon. And in Evernote, she then tags that item with that same category. So if I go back and I want to say, show me all the notes in Evernote that are promotional, I can pull that in Evernote using that tag, and I would be able to search in FreshBooks for things that have the promotion category. I would be able to double check those. And so we use the tagging system to be able to do that. Once it has been tagged and tagged in Evernote and entered in FreshBooks and categorized, Lillian then moves it from the receipts to reconcile into a notebook for that year. So each year has its own set of receipts, and everything goes into that notebook. And you can see that this screenshot is after I had a scanning party because there's a whole lot of stuff in receipts to reconcile that we'll be going through. So, and this is a little snapshot of my finances stack. So Catherine, you can see the receipts to reconcile appears at the top because I put the dot on it. And then as we move things out of there, they go into the year's notebook. There are a couple of other pieces to my receipts process. When I travel for clients, I need to bill those expenses to them. And so I would add the billable to client tag so that I can keep up that I did charge this back to someone. So I do have a tag for that. And when they get entered into FreshBooks, a copy of that receipt gets added, and it gets added to the client's invoice. Until I send that invoice, it shows up as billable, and then once it gets paid, it shows up as recouped. So I'm able to track. So if I wanted to say, okay, what was this thing that was billed to a client? Did it get paid back? I can see that in my system. And then the third place that we're using Evernote and receipts is about paying employee expenses. So Lillian incurs expenses when she has mileage, when she's recipe testing for the blog or the cookbook. And what we decided is that we were going to track those in Expensify. Expensify is a really great free tool that you can use to track expenses. I love that you can figure out your mileage in it. Allows you to attach receipts, all kinds of stuff. So Lillian can go in and track her expenses there, and then she can submit an expense report to me. And I get an email that there's a new report. I can approve it, and then it automatically electronically pays her. And then I can export that expense report to Evernote so that it is stored with everything else that I need. And so those get added to Expensify notebook in Evernote, and then I have a list. The subject isn't great, so I'll need to go in and change that so it says whose mileage it is, but it does have Lillian's name in it. So I can go in and be able to look back at what are the expense reports that I've paid for Lillian, and those will all be in that Expensify notebook. Once I've processed that, I will add that to the 2014 expenses because that's part of what we had. So for expenses for this year. So I'll clear it out of here and put it into the 2014 notebook. So everything by the end of the year is in that 2014 notebook. So if I needed to produce receipts for anything, as long as it's for this year, I'll be able to find it in there. It is being tagged with the category, cross-referenced with FreshBooks, and so everything I need is in here. So that's my process, really just using a few tools. Using Evernote to hold the expenses. It's my reference point. I have actually gotten rid of my filing cabinet in the last 2 months because everything's in Evernote, and so I don't have to have little receipts everywhere. Using FreshBooks for the expense tracking and for the accounting piece of it, and then Expensify for being able to track expenses and submit reports. So that is my process, and we addressed a couple of questions along the way, but we'll just take a quick pause. Does anybody have any questions about either getting receipts into Evernote or that kind of basic process that I'm using for tracking expenses.
And why those questions queue up, there's just a couple of points I want to make. There's a couple underlying assumptions that we want to just articulate. Number one is obviously Lillian, in Kristi's case, has access through a shared notebook to these. So we're sharing notebooks with team members, which is one of those core skills, and I assume everybody kind of picked up on that. But also, moving notes around is a key part of Kristi's process, and as you'll see, it's going to be a key part of my process as well. And in that first webinar, our hangout that we did on strategies for organizing your notes with Evernote, we cover several of the ways to make that kind of thing happen quickly, because as much as Evernote, well, you may feel overwhelmed by the movement and the talking about what Kristi and I are laying out in terms of our process, but in reality, Evernote makes it so easy to move and transfer data around through key commands, through multiple ways to drag and drop notes and notebooks, that it's really not overhead, it's efficiency. So that's just a couple of points that I wanted to add.
Gary asked a great question about, do I break my notebook down by months? I don't, and the reason for that is it would just be too many notebooks for me. But what I do, and I did not show a great example of that, so that's a perfect question, is I put the date of the expense in the name of the note, so that if I am searching for everything from our October, I can put in a search string that will return just the October notes, etc. So I do use a naming convention, and I know Stacey's going to talk more about naming conventions in her example, but I do use a naming convention in the note that includes the date so that I can search by month. So it was a perfect question, Gary, and thank you so much for that. That is part of my process, is how I name it. So thanks. I think I left that out, and that is a great question.
Good. Okay, well, we are happy to continue to take questions as we move forward, but I think we're ready to give you guys kind of my perspective and how it differs from what Kristi does. One of the key ways that Kristi and I differ is that I'm actually outsourcing the data entry to a bookkeeper with my system. So it gets a little more complex, but we wanted to introduce you to that in case that's your scenario as well. And I wanted to just kind of give you some background on how I went through and designed my process, which started with me sitting here saying, okay, how am I going to track the status? Because the reality is I'm designing a expense and receipt workflow here, and I needed to decide, you know, how do I want to move things through the data entry process, through the reconciliation process, and through the tax, ultimately the tax and archive process. So I looked at all of those things, and I said, okay, here's my available tools that I'm going to deploy in my system, and tags are one of them. And you'll see Kristi uses tags quite a lot in her system. I do use tags in my system, but in a very simplified way. That is the first tool that I said is in my wheelhouse, and you can see, again, differences between how Kristi and I deploy that once you see my example. The other that Kristi's already really kind of shown you is this inbox, outbox mentality. So I'm actually using a notebook, shared notebooks, to help define where things are in the process. And it's a very effective technique to moving things through a workflow. I use it not only in my expense workflow, but when we design workflows for clients and, you know, manage our internal communications. If something's in one notebook, then it needs to be worked on, and then it gets moved to another notebook when the status changes. So that's another tool that I deploy quite a lot, and you'll see in my workflow that we talk about. And then the third, which Kristi just hit on, is the naming conventions. How I name my notes helps impact the status and the process. And in the question that Andrew asked here, does Evernote read the data and therefore become searchable by date? So that's actually a big part of it, and I was going to touch on that as well. The search feature of Evernote is so powerful that it is really not necessary to break things down into monthly notebooks. I don't break them down into monthly notebooks either. I really just put everything into a year. I deal with things by year, because again, every photo that's put into Evernote is indexed by Evernote, and I can then search for that date, for that amount, for that vendor, and those types of things are very important tools that help me to retrieve information when I need it. And obviously you'll get a lot more information about that during our next Evernote, our next Get Untethered Hangout, where we're going to talk about search tips.
And Stacey, if I can just add one thing to that, the one challenge, and the reason I have been adding the date to the name of the note, is every now and then I'll get a receipt where the date's not clear, or because I have so many restaurant receipts that might be handwritten that the date isn't showing up well in search because it's not written well. So that is why I did go ahead and put the date and the name, because just I needed to have a little bit more consistency and couldn't rely on all of the receipts that I have to have the date in them.
And I completely agree with Kristi. I'd use that in mine as well, which you'll see. And additionally, it helps differentiate between the 48 Panera receipts that I have, you know, which date it's on at a glance. So you'll see that as we move forward. Okay, I'm ready to go to the next slide. All right, so Panera, I live there basically. I should be paid by them instead of me paying them. I'm there all the time. Okay, so the next thing is, this is what in answer to that question, I have all of those tools, and what I developed is a stack that I call bookkeeping, HE bookkeeping for Harmon Enterprises bookkeeping. And I also wanted to articulate, I actually care about both my personal and my business expenses in terms of a receipt perspective. I just prefer to have all of that information. It helps me in my personal budgeting, understand where things are going, reconciling that. Sometimes I put business expenses on the wrong card, you know, that kind of a thing. So I have a process that encompasses both my personal and business receipts. And the first notebook, though, that I have is really just kind of a back office function. I call it key and questions. And again, I use the dot like Kristi does in order to sort that at the top. And I put things that are helpful to understanding and documenting my workflow of accounts that I have with QuickBooks. I put any templates about particular data entry that I want to have happen by my bookkeeper. This way, if the bookkeeper hires someone else, there's in essence a training manual there for them. I have code about what automatic payments that I've authorized with my credit cards. You know, these kinds of just reference materials that impact the system, I centralize in a key and questions notebook. Okay, next slide.
And just to be clear, Stacey, I care about my personal. I just don't have them split up.
Yeah. Okay. That's right.
And the receipts to reconcile is just for Lillian. I process other things from my inbox. So receipts to reconcile is just for the business, and everything goes into one notebook because, as you've been following along, I don't like to have a lot of notebooks. So I just don't split up my business and personal receipts. I use the tags to do that, but
yeah, so just a different solution to the same thing. Okay, so then, like Kristi said, digitizing and centralizing the information in the receipts is core to the process. And I use all of the skills that Kristi oriented you to. I'm constantly photographing receipts from the field. I'm scanning using my Canon. I mean, I'm traveling right now, and I have my Canon scanner with me so that I can scan from the road. So I travel with it. I have, actually, this is part of my process too. I didn't intend to show this, but when I travel, I have, in the film strip, you can probably see me, I've got a, just a folder.
Lillian, if you could switch the camera to Stacey,
yeah,
so everybody can see it really well.
My process is, you know, if I can't photograph it right there, I'm just putting it into this inbox that I'm centralizing, this inbox folder, and then I'll go through and I will scan them when I have 5 minutes to do that, or when I'm off, sometimes when I'm at the airport just waiting for the plane or, you know, such. So that's actually the physical part of my process where I'm then digitizing it and scanning it in. And I've been really happy with my Canon P215. Again, there's lots of solutions out there. Just make sure, as Kristi mentioned, you get one that actually is creating notes and integrates directly with Evernote. You can go to the Evernote Market to kind of see a list of those kinds of things. I am emailing in receipts, and then I love file this, and I'm going to show you some screenshots about that, but that is kind of the missing part, that I don't have to now scan or email in PDF documents of my credit card or my utilities. I can just have it auto-added to my account, and I'll show you what that looks like. And what happens is the first thing I do is I'm digitizing and I'm centralizing those in what I've called a raw scans notebook. So the point is, get the data in there. I'm going to make sure that it's centralized, and sometimes I don't have time to name it the way I want it named, or I know that I'm getting an invoice and then the payment of that invoice I'm wanting to mesh up at another time. So again, I'm centralizing all of this into a raw scan, and so centralize my system. Next slide. Okay, and file this is part of that, as I mentioned, and it's here's a screenshot of my account. So what I've done is I have an account with File This. I went in there and I picked from the right-hand side all of the utility and credit card and bank accounts that I have. I told File This fetch, you know, my account credentials, and what they do is they go through and they, in essence, sweep those accounts on either a daily or a weekly basis, depending on your tier of service. It's very affordable. I think I pay $20 a year for this service, and it goes through and it automatically sweeps those accounts and it sucks out the statement and it puts it in my Evernote account as a PDF. So here's an example. You can see I've connected my Citibank Visa card, and then on the right-hand side you can see that I have a File This notebook for Citibank Visa. It puts a new note in there, and it tells me where it came from, and it puts a PDF of the statement in there. In addition, it actually emails me to say you have a new note in your File This notebook in Evernote. So my process then is I go into Evernote, I move that note into the raw scans folder, and now it's part of my process along with all of the other documents that I've either photographed or emailed in to the system, into my Evernote account. Okay, ready to move on? So that's step one. I'm centralizing it, and I use that raw scans notebook, and I put all personal and business receipts in there. I just get them in there. The second step is I clean up and I review. So I actually have my assistant go through and normalize the data, in essence. So when something goes into the raw scans notebook, I have them go through and change the name, the subject line of the note. So you can see here that I get a date, and I put the title of the vendor in the subject line. Now, depending on your process, and I'll show this at the end, you may choose, if you like the date, to reverse it so that you have 14 or the year at the beginning, so that you can, yeah, don't worry, you don't have to worry about it. I'll show it. Yeah, there. So I get it cleaned up, but if you put 14 first, then that'll numerically sort all your annual receipts, and then you could sort it by month. So you could change the order to be like 14 then a day. That'll kind of get you around needing to create notebooks for each individual month. But I'm cleaning up the data, having my assistant normalize the note title, which is going to impact the data entry that's done. And I can write any notes around the note I want at this time, but I'm basically cleaning up and reviewing. We're also merging notes at this phase, so if I've got, say, an invoice that came in and then a picture of the check that I wrote or a receipt of the PayPal expense that was used to pay it, I'll have that merged at this point so that those two notes are becoming one, and it's really just getting tidied up and prepared for data entry. So that's my step 2 of my process. Step 3. Now, the step 3 is my assistant will be working on that, and it's in a shared notebook, raw scans. I will go in whenever I have time, and I will also do a find and move notes. And I actually forgot one part of my process in the prior slide, and you can see it here. The assistant will add, if it's a personal or a business expense, through the tag. Okay, so this is where I use tags. I'll tag something as business or personal, and they just reconcile that against the credit card number or the cash that I mention in the note that is created. And then at some point I'll go through and I'll do a find, and you can see this screen on the left shows I have a saved search for all notes that are tagged business in my raw scans notebook. And you can see up in the upper right-hand toolbar in the Mac there, it actually shows you what the search is, and then it'll retrieve those. I quickly scan those to see if the data entry kind of looks correct. If there's anything I need to change, I'll change it. And then I'm mass moving those notes into their proper notebook, either the business incoming or the personal incoming. So at this phase, I'm actually separating them out so that they get put into their own notebook, and that prepares them for data entry into my system. Okay, so I'm handling this with my assistant. If you have a bookkeeper, your bookkeeper could do that for you, or you could do it yourself. You have a choice. The next phase then is that the bookkeeper who is shared that notebook with, so the bookkeeper's got shared access to the business and personal incoming notebooks, will then do the data entry into QuickBooks for me. And they will use that key and questions notebook to understand my chart of accounts a little bit better and what I had intended there. But if they have a question about it, they'll just put question, and this is where I use a naming convention. They will use question in the subject title so that I can then sort by name and see all of the questions if they are not able to know or properly read my mind about what category it should be. And then I'll go in and code all of those. So you can see here on the left, you know, the bank statement went in there, but she had several that didn't have a matching receipt, so this is where my reconciliation is actually happening, and I'll just go in and make notes. And she's actually using annotation features in Evernote to really mark up the PDF there and highlight the numbers that need further clarification about what category those should be coded to. And then at some point, as she does the data entry, my process is she'll put done in the subject line of the note. So the goal is that all of those incoming notes from raw scans go into the inbox, and then when they're processed and actually put in, done gets added in capital letters. And that's a way that I can then search and sort and then eventually move those notes into a completed notebook and be out of the process. So the step 5 is that we move those as soon as they're all mentioned as done, and this is just an ongoing thing, maybe on a weekly basis. Those receipts will get moved from the business or the personal into incoming into the business or personal processed, depending on where they are. So you can see too at a glance, I can get a feel for how much data or where people are in the process by that little note number note count that's onto the right-hand side of my notebook stack. So that's the process step 5. And then what happens is over the year, that type of stuff adds up, and things move through this raw scans, business or personal incoming, onto personal processed or business processed. And at the end of the year, or when I'm ready to do my taxes, February 1st, of course, right? I am...
Your nose is going to grow, Stacey Harmon.
I filed a tax extension this year, so I will admit. What I will do is those processed become my archive notebooks for the tax year. So I actually rename the stack name, sorry, the notebook name that's on the left, the business process 2014. I rename to, at the end of this year, I'll rename it 2014 taxes business receipts. And that becomes kind of my archive and my audit trail, my paper trail for any notes and receipts that I have. And then I also, at this point, will create a tax documents notebook that the intent is to share with my CPA. Okay, so my bookkeeper, I trained him on Evernote. I got them into Evernote.
Oh, it looks like Stacey's audio has frozen for a minute. So we'll just give her a second to get reconnected.
So what I did is I created a tax document. I put, if Kristi, you want to move to the next slide. Thank you. You can see what I did is in that tax documents, they don't actually need all of my receipts unless there's a question or an audit. So I just put in all of my 1099s, all of my miscellaneous income, all of my mortgage interest statements, all of those things that actually do impact that I would typically just hand them in paper format. I scanned it, put it into these tax documents, and then I publicly share it with my CPA. So I make a shared notebook via a public link, and the next email, then I email that to my CPA, which the next slide shows. So this is literally the example of what I sent my CPA, and you can see I highlighted, I said all the supporting tax documents that I have are located here, and I made it a hyperlink to the public Evernote notebook, which when he clicks on it, what he sees is this image on the right, and he at the bottom can choose to just view the notebook and see the data if he needs it from any web browser. Okay, so he used that to compile my taxes, And then, to my chagrin, he mailed me back printed hard copies of my documents, which I will promptly scan and put into my system. But that is the process that I'm taking. And he doesn't need to be an Evernote user. He really just has access to this public notebook. And then when this process is over, I can stop sharing that, and I have it retained in my archive. Okay, so that's my process. I wanted to also show this screenshot. I was just working with a client yesterday here in Houston. He's an Evernote business user, and he actually has his accountant, who's a very important part of his overall operations because he's dealing with a lot of, you know, some bigger structure than I am, and she's actually also on Evernote Business. So they're both on Evernote Business as part of, he actually adds her as part of her, sorry, I apologize. He is actually adding her as part of his business account, and that gives them some additional collaboration, and they use this inbox outbox technique. So you can see the second notebook there is titled Anne, and any receipt he puts into there, and then she's actually doing the normalization of the data and the data entry into QuickBooks, and when she does that, she moves it into that accounting notebook that's there. Now, there's a few nuances that he does, which is he actually is using Sketch to write the code in the PDF or the image that is inserted into the note. This is because part of their process is his bookkeeper and accountant is actually printing some of these and wanted the code into the document. So that's a little choice and a nuance that might appeal to you. It's not something that I need as part of my process. I go completely digital with it. But if you're working with people that want print out copies, using that sketch and that annotation feature to put the code, which you can see there, in his case it's, you know, SV1225, I think, right there, is actually in the image. So just a variance that you might consider or have appealing to how you work. Okay, so that is my process. It's, you know, there are similarities to what Kristi does, but also some differences. I also am using FreshBooks like she uses it, but I'm sorry, like Kristi does, but I use it simply to invoice and accept payments. I don't use it actually for my account reconciliation. But I'm a big fan of it as well. It's an outstanding tool and part of my process as well. It's just not part of my Evernote process, other than I will maybe create a PDF of revenue that was received through FreshBooks and add it to the tax notebook so that my CPA can actually see that information when compiling my taxes. So if you have questions, feel free to queue them up on the side, and I'll be happy to address them. And but you can see the differences about how you could work with outside people versus an internal team in managing here. Kristi, do you have anything to add on that or any thoughts about it?
No, I think that both of these give kind of a good overview of what the process can look like. And I have to say that for me, the big piece was having that inbox process in place where receipts have a place to live until they're reconciled, and then having that collection point. The naming conventions and the tags have been really helpful. It's just made a huge difference. I was very excited to be able to get rid of the file folders that were overflowing with receipts. It just has been huge. And I think you've converted me finally. I've been thinking about it for a little while, but I think you've converted me. I think I'm going to sign up for File This because I just would love to not have to scan that one. And so I think I'll be switching to that over the next couple of months.
You know, the other thing too that it really is an advantage for me is I actually am able to keep up on them quicker and paying them more in a more timely manner. Like it gets into my process faster because it happens automatically, and then I don't have an email that I have to then add as part of my process. It's just there. So I'm very impressed with the tool. So it helps quite a lot. I think you'll like it.
That's great. Thank you, Jean. That's a lovely comment. I love Evernote too. Well, let's go look at a little bit of our wrap-up material. Stacey, you want to take us through this?
Sure. So let me pull up the right place here on my screen. Oh, I got myself all windowed up here. Okay, so basically this is available for replay. You can kind of go through it and model it in your own your own Evernote system, but we also have an expansion. We've talked about particularly how to use File This in your workflow, and emailing details about how to email notes and get them into your account in our resources for the book. So even if you haven't purchased the book, you can subscribe to the resources notebook here at getuntethered.com. And Kristi and I put in writing a lot of the things that we weren't able to expand upon in the book because they are either variable or just not directly relevant to all of that. They're relevant to a very small subset. So you can get additional details there, but please subscribe to that resources notebook. We add and update it all the time, and you can get the most current information there. Next, we've got community and an opportunity to continue the conversation. Obviously, Evernote is changing all of the time, and with the Evernote conference coming up, you're going to see a lot of changes and releases coming out, and hopefully some new snazzy features. And obviously, Kristi and I will be sharing our experience there as much as we can socially, either in Facebook, where we have a great group where people are asking questions and can get advice about living a more untethered life, through the Google Plus page, the YouTube channel, and our Twitter account, as well as on the web. So connect with us there. And use the hashtag GetUntethered. You can also purchase the book in a digital format at getuntethered.com, and coming soon by the end of the week, the print version as well. Available in PDF, EPUB, Kindle, and now print. So we're getting that added, and we have an offer if you have not purchased the book and would like to get 10% off for 1 week, September 10 GH for Google Hangout. We'll get you 10% off the digital copy. So please take advantage of that. And if you've purchased a different version and you want another digital version, this doesn't apply to print, but the digital version, we can help you upgrade to another version if you have an interest. So we appreciate your support on that, and we go through about 15 workflows that you can use to use Evernote to improve your efficiency and your productivity. And then our next topic, as we already mentioned, is going to be the ins and outs of Evernote search. We've scheduled that for October 16th from 10 to 11 Central Standard Time. That's a Thursday as well. And if you have questions or anything specific you'd like covered, please just post it in the Facebook group, and we will be sure to go through that. We're going to make you power search users. It's a tool that we just absolutely rely on, and one of the core advantages of Evernote. So we're going to show you why and how they're kind of on the leading edge of that with contextual search and some of these other elements. So please join us then, and we'll post that on the YouTube and Google Plus page. And also on
don't forget, Stacey, we're also going to do a recap of the changes in Evernote that have come out of the conference during that.
Okay, so if you advance to the next slide. That is supporting exactly what Kristi is going to say. We are going to, this is what you're talking about, right?
No, actually during the ins and outs, the October, because
right.
we know that around the time of conference, because iOS 8 came out, we will be doing kind of a recap of changes to Evernote as part of the ins and outs search hangout. So we'll have a recap of those. And Catherine's asking about where the previously recorded hangouts are, and you can access those on our YouTube channel.
On the YouTube channel, absolutely. So if you go to YouTube and search Get Untethered, you'll find those you'll be able to subscribe to our channel, and then actually if you subscribe, automatically notified of when we post new ones. So that'd be a great tip to keeping up with what we're doing. And also, Kristi and I, as mentioned, will be talking to you live from the conference, giving you kind of the on-the-street, live at the moment opportunities as they're announced, and show you kind of some of the things we're excited about from San Francisco. So we're really looking forward to that, and we'll give you kind of a recap also of what our presentations are. I'm going to be talking about seamless teamwork with Evernote, and Kristi?
I am going to be talking about how to merge your digital and paper worlds, because I like to have paper, but I also love my digital. So I'm going to talk about some great tools that let you have it all.
And actually, if you are welcome, we would love to have you join us in San Francisco. There we can get you 25% off. Do you remember it off the top of your head, Kristi? Is it?
Let me look real quick.
I think it's EBCC 25. We'll confirm that, and we'll add it to the Twitter stream and all of our other channels, but certainly you can register and get you can get 25% off your registration and join us there, meet us in person, and we'll talk Evernote with you, we promise. So this is how you can reach us if you have any further questions or need some assistance in bringing Evernote to your organization. We certainly love to help out in that regard and answer your ongoing questions. So with that, Kristi, anything else to add?
No, this was a lot of fun, and just appreciate everybody joining us for learning about receipts.
Yeah, thank you for your questions, and we will see you next time and live from Evernote Conference 2014.
Woo!
Talk to you then.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.